Magnaye. Occupational therapist po ako. I've been practicing for 13 years now. So most of my time I spent it sa Manila. But last year kasi I moved here sa Lucena, and then I have my own clinic here. But because of the pandemic, no, we have to stop operation for a while. So during those times, medyo wala na akong ginagawa. So hindi ako sanay na walang ginagawa. So what I did is, I started my own YouTube channel. That's the first one. So you can actually, you can visit it. Marami tayong videos doon that you can watch. I also suggest na you watch it kasi yung mga terminologies natin at saka yung mga topics na pag-uusapan natin eventually nandun na. So, hindi na natin paulit-ulitin. So, I suggest that you visit it and watch. I divided the videos into different tawag dito areas. So, may growth motor doon, may fine motor, visual perceptual. So, if you have time, you can watch it. And then, after that, so what I did is to make toys, educational toys for kids. Intended talaga siya for kids like yung mga nakikita ko in the clinic. That's why, kung makikita nyo, yung mga video, yung video kanina, yun yung mga sample toys. It's actually to give parents some option na pwedeng ibigay na activity at home. So, pero hindi pa rin siya enough. So, this is like another area na gusto ko talagang explore. So, the advocacy is to reach out to as many parents as possible. Initially, that's the plan. It's the parents. So, gusto sana natin na mas maraming matulungan na nanay at tatay para ma-manage yung mga anak nila sa bahay. But then, when we started, I started receiving requests. Ang dami din palang teachers na parang interested. So I thought, okay lang din naman kasi with the teachers, mas marami tayong parents na matitrain. Tama po ba? Mas maraming teachers, mas maraming parents na pwede tayong makatulong sa kanila. So this advocacy will be done hopefully every week. So for today, it will be a lecture type. But then again, we'll try to accommodate some questions sa dulo para we will see also how this platform work. Baka kayanin natin to use this for Talakayan. So we will see. We will try it later. And then, what else? So I think there's no more to say na. Let's finish the intro and let's go to yung pinaka part talaga natin, yung topic natin for today. So that is my story. Hopefully I will know your stories as well, no, habang nagtatalakayan tayo, makikilala natin yung isa't isa. So let's move on. Like what I've mentioned sa what do you call this group natin, we are going to talk about this very important topic. Okay, it's sensory processing. For some of you, siguro po yung mga parents na may anak na nagte-therapy, this is common na term na naririnig nyo from your therapist, no? From your speech therapist, from your OT, even from your doctors. For the teachers, I know you're already familiar. But again, I think we need to study it even more para mas maintindihan natin kung ano yung nangyayari. Why our children are behaving that way and what can we do to address it. So when we're talking about sensory processing, there are three important things that we have to note. Okay, before po ako mag-proceed, okay naman yung audio natin. Teacher Rack?
Okay naman po.
Yes po, okay po.
Okay naman.
Alright, sige.
Yes
So I'll
po,
proceed
okay
na po. So sa sensory processing, there are three important things that we have to note. So the first one, ito yung processes na nangyayari sa katawan natin. Okay? The sensory input is received. So kunyari po, may hinawakan natin yung anak natin. So yung sensory receptors, siya yung nag-receive ng input. So it's received and then right after that, Yung input na yon magta-travel sa brain, and the brain will organize the brain will process, and the brain will give meaning to it. Okay? After that, pag nabigyan na ng meaning ng brain, we will make a goal-directed response. Okay? So those are the three important processes sa sensory processing. But I have to uh, emphasize this, no? Itong tatlong process na to, it happens that hindi siya like may lag ng konti. Dire-diretso yan. Pag nagkaroon ng late response, then possible na may problem. Okay? So let's move on. What happens in the body during sensory integration? So like what I mentioned before, yung sensory receptors, nagre-receive siya ng information from the environment. Pagkatapos nun, yung input na yon, natatransmit siya as electrical impulses papunta sa brain. Okay? At pupunta siya sa specific parts of the brain. Tapos dun siya dinidecode. Yung part na yun ng brain ang nagbibigay ng meaning dun sa input na natanggap. Alright? And then, again, after that, the brain sends back the message to the areas in the body para gumalaw yung katawan to make appropriate response. So, ibig sabihin po nun, let's just say an example, meron kang nakitang aso papalapit sa inyo. Okay? So, if you have a positive experience with dogs, ang magiging response nyo would be ipipet nyo yung dog or lalapitan nyo siya or ihahag nyo. But again, on the other side, if you have a negative experience pagdating sa aso, possible na you're going to run away from it or sisigaw kayo or magtatago. Tama po ba? So those two responses, that's how the brain interprets the stimuli, which is the dog. So siya yung stimulus natin. Nakita nyo yung dog, narinig nyo na tumahol siya. So that's the senses that you're working already, no? So yung brain natin mag-a-attach ng meaning to it depende kung ano yung past experience natin sa dog, and then after that the body will respond. So that's how it works. Very very simple lang isipin, pero ang daming processes na kailangang mangyari inside the body. So sensory processing, the development of Teacher Rax. Sorry.
Yes, teach.
May lumabas na?
Yes,
Wala.
teach. Yes. Meron po.
Alright, ayan. Medyo may lag lang pala. Sorry.
Meron po.
I have another kasi I am using another screen pero hindi lumalabas. Pero dito sa computer ko kasi okay na. So sige, let's proceed. Sa sensory processing, the development of the systems begins in the womb and continues throughout our lives. So, ibig sabihin po nun, sa loob pa lang ng tiyan, pwede mo nang ma-stimulate yung baby. Like, this is the reason why some parents, pinaparinig nila ng classical music yung anak nila while still in the womb. Or, di ba, minsan, kinakausap natin, habang nasa loob lang sila ng tiyan. So that's the reason why. But it doesn't stop. So it continues throughout our lives. Even until now, we're actually developing our processing. So this is very important to note kasi hindi siya nag-stop. Okay? So hindi ibig sabihin na okay ka or okay yung anak mo now, after lang years, still okay pa rin sila. Okay, so later on we'll discuss it even further. Now, it allows us to understand what is going on around us because we are talking about the different senses. So, aside from that, it is also the basis for learning. So, malaki ang part na nagagawa ng sensory processing sa learning ng isang bata. So, this is really the foundation skills. So, if you are not going to address sensory processing, then possible na magkakaroon ng problema in terms of learning or development of different skills. Now, we are going to talk about the sensory systems involved. Now, the question is, are there really more than 5 senses? So, di ba sa school, ang tinuturo before sa atin, we have this basic senses. Sense of sight, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. These are all exterosenses. But aside from that, we also have hidden senses. We call that interosenses, and these two are plus the tactile sense or the sense of touch. These three are actually the foundation of learning or the foundation of developing the other senses. So we are the first one is proprioceptive sense. That's for body position. So anything na related sa katawan natin, yung muscles natin, yung joints natin, any movement na ginagawa natin, um, related siya sa proprioceptive sense. Aside from that, we also have vestibular. So this is particularly known as balance and motion sense or movement sense. So pag gumagalaw tayo, yung vestibular sense natin na-activate siya. Any kind of movement, okay? So later on, I want you to take note of these two plus the tactile input or the tactile sense because these three are the foundation talaga of sensory processing. So what are the 7 senses that we have? Let's try to discuss it one by one. Okay, so visual, we're very familiar with that. So seeing sense, it gives us the information kung saan tayo, kung anong kulay, kung anong shape, kung ano yung layo natin sa isang bagay, or kung ano yung ginagawang movement natin or ng ibang tao or ng ibang object. Okay, so this is very simple, yung pinaka-basic senses. Auditory is sa hearing or pakikinig. So it allows us to locate, capture, discriminate. For example, meron kayong rattle. So pag pinatunog niyo yung rattle, kaya ba nung bata na hanapin kung saan galing yung tunog? Tumitingin ba siya or lumilingon ba siya kung saan galing yung tunog? Nadidiscriminate niya ba yung sound? For example, nadidiscriminate niya ba yung sound if si mommy yung tumawag or stranger? Or si mommy or si daddy? Natitry ba niyang i-differentiate kung kanino galing yung boses or kung ano yung sound na naririnig niya? So that's discrimination. Now, olfactory is more of the smelling. Okay? So together with olfactory, that's gustatory, the tasting sense. So ito naman, these two are the chemical sense. So merong outside factor, no? So kunyari, with olfactory, it's the odor or kung ano yung naamoy, and then with the other one, it's kung ano yung nalalasahan. So these are the basic senses. Let's move on to wait lang. Basta po kayo. Sorry, naglalag yung PowerPoint. Okay pa kayo?
Yes po.
Yes
Alright.
po.
Yes po.
Sabihan
Yes
niyo
po.
po ako pag meron like kunyari naglalag yung voice ko or mahina para
Okay
I can
lang po.
stop. Okay, good.
Okay lang po.
Medyo hindi pa naman kayo inaantok, no?
Okay
lang
naman
po,
po.
ma'am.
Let's move on.
Okay
Okay lang
naman
po,
Kasi
po.
we'll see. Alright, okay, sorry. Ayan na. So these three are like yung pinaka-important senses that we have. So again, vestibular is pag may movement or may body motion. Vestibular is the most powerful sensory system. Okay? So it allows us to balance ourselves. Okay? aside from that, nare-recognize natin kung ano yung, kung nasan tayo in relation to the ground or to other objects around us. Okay? Proprioception naman is more on body position. So, body awareness. Nasaan yung katawan mo? Ano yung position ng katawan mo? Nakataas ba yung kamay mo? Nakababa? So, it's more of that. How you position your body. Okay? And, like, ano yung movement na ginagawa nito? For example, para mas maintindihan natin, if you are walking on, like, sa street, no? Tapos may biglang, meron kang nakitang nakaharang sa daan. Ang tendency mo is umiwas, right? So, these two system, the vestibular and the proprioception are at work. Okay? So, for some kids na nahihirapan to make body adjustments, okay? Like, for example, madalas silang matama yung katawan, madalas mabunggo, or like mag-bump sa mga bagay-bagay, clumsy, laging nadadapa. So, those are the signs, okay, na mayroon possible problem in terms of vestibular and proprioception. So later on, isa-isahin natin yan. The next one is touch or tactile sense. So this gives us the information about about yung mga nafe-feel natin around us. Okay? So, it tells us about the pressure, the temperature, the texture, the size, the shapes, even pain. So, all of this are related to the tactile sensation. Now, let's focus on the systems. So again, vestibular system, it's the most powerful. Pinakamahalaga din siya sa mga systems na meron tayo. So it answers the questions, where am I in relation to the Earth's surface? You know your position if you're like, kunyari, if you're upright, if you're, kunyari, nakatayo ka, nakahiga, okay? Or kung ano yung change sa position nyo. So yung receptor nito is located sa tenga natin, sa loob ng tenga. That's why minsan, if you have ear infection, even yung balance nyo affected, it's because of that. Okay? So if you yung mga may vertigo, ganyan, because the receptor is inside the ear, so affected even the balance. Okay? Sometimes yung iba nasusuka. Okay? So those are the signs of vestibular na parang nadi-disrupt yung vestibular system nila. Okay, so this information is then sent to the brain for processing. Then the brain sends information about our body in relation to the ground. Okay, and then after that, yung body natin nag-a-adjust. So yung body natin, either kung kailangan mong umiwas, kung mayroong obstacle, or whatever you need to do, or the body adjustments that you need to make. Okay, so this vestibular system assists in that. Balance and motion systems receive some stimuli from the ear canal. So yan yung nabanggit ko kanina. Nasa inner ear yung receptor nun. That's why anything that has something to do with the ear affected the vestibular system. Next is proprioception or proprioceptive system. It gives us information about how we are moving and where our limbs are in relation to our bodies. So it's more of the movement of the body. So kung anong position niya, kung paano siya gumalaw, kung ano yung speed of movement. So those things related siya sa proprioception. Ang receptors naman ito, nasa muscles natin, nasa joints, ligaments, tendons, connective tissues. Sila yung nag-receive ng input from the outside or from the environment or from our own body, and then transmit that message to the brain. Then the brain sends back the message to that part of the body para mag-respond or gumalaw. Next is the tactile system. This is the largest sense we have. Okay? Kasi, di ba, yung skin natin, sila yung nag-cover ng pinakamalaking parts of our body. So, it tells us about the physical properties. Okay? It is also the basis for fine motor development. So, that's why may mga kids na late na develop yung fine motor skills nila. It has something to do sometimes with the tactile system. So, with this system, we have two types, protective or defensive. Okay? So, ito yung, ang goal nito is to protect yung self natin. So, usually, nagre-react tayo, for example, if it's light touch. So, di ba, parang pag light touch, bilis mong mag-react ng body. It's because of the protective role of the skin. But aside from that, we also have the discriminative role nung skin natin. So, it tells us, for example, kung ano yung hinahawakan natin. If, for example, it's rough, it's soft, or tawag dito, matigas ba dyan, malambot ba yan. So, this one, it becomes the primary role of our skin or of the tactile system, because eventually ito na yung magiging basis ng mga bata for learning. Sensory processing disorder. So now we're done with kung ano ang sensory processing. Now ang pag-uusapan natin is kung ano yung mga problema na related sa sensory processing. We call this sensory processing disorder or SPD. So kung maririnig nyo ako mamaya na sinasabi ko yung SPD, so that means sensory processing disorder po, no? So it is the difficulty in making use of and integrating the sensory information. So if you still remember the drawing kanina, yung tatlong circles sa unang slides natin, sa unang slide, I mean. So, ibig sabihin po doon, nagkakaroon ng problema sa proseso na yon. Either sa pagtanggap o pag-receive ng input or doon sa pagpaprocess at pagbibigay na pag-organize ng sensory input sa brain. So, SPD can exist even when there are no underlying conditions, or but most of the time, it is present in conjunction with other neurological or psychological diagnosis. Now, what causes SPD? Ano po ba yung dahilan bakit nagkakaroon ng problem? So most of the time, may neurological problem or mayroong problema sa brain, nagkaroon ng damage, for example. It causes the nervous system or na ma-disrupt yung processing. Now, aside from that, it can be because the brain is not receiving messages or the messages that are received are inconsistent. So dun mismo sa proseso ng pagtanggap at pag-interpret, dun nagkakaroon ng problema. The sensory information is consistent but does not integrate properly with other sensory information from the other sensory systems. Now, ito po yung pag-uusapan natin, yung categories ng sensory processing. So dito, mas maiintindihan natin talaga yung mga problems na namamanifest ng mga anak natin. So the commonly seen na problem is, we call it sensory modulation disorder. So ang nangyayari po dito, yung responses ng anak natin, yung behavior nila, hindi siya nagmamatch dun sa expected na dapat nilang response. So either yung reaction po nila ay too little or too much. So over-responsive or under-responsive po yung tawag natin doon. So over-responsive, ibig sabihin, too much yung response nila. For some kids, tawag dito, yung responses nila is okay lang, typical responses sa mga bagay-bagay. But for them, yung threshold po ng mga bata na may over-responsivity, masyadong mababa. So, konting input lang, nag-react agad sila. So, later on, sige, we will explain it further. But aside from that, we also have sensory seeking. Ito yung another common na makikita natin sa mga anak natin. But it's also good to note na from time to time, magkakaroon talaga tayo ng sensory modulation problem. Okay? Even until now, kahit adult tayo, minsan, di ba pa, parang masyado tayong irritable or medyo over-responsive tayo sa mga bagay-bagay. Kunyari, masyado tayo na-overwhelm agad pag maingay yung lugar, maraming tao, sabay-sabay nagsasalita. So, it's possible. But, pag sa mga bata or sa mga anak natin, we have to take note of these three things. Yung frequency, kung gaano kadalas, yung intensity, kung gaano ka intense yung responses nila, and then yung duration, like gaano siya katagal. So if for example you have a kid and then madalas siyang nagre-react to things, masyado siyang over-responsive sa lahat ng bagay, sa maingay, sa light, like and other sensory input. And then parang ang response niya is sumisigaw, umiiyak, nagwawala, and then the duration is matagal, like hindi niya mapakalma yung sarili niya agad-agad. Then dun kailangan natin na may gawin or may i-address yung issue because it will affect his performance or like yung performance sa school or even yung play niya, yung ability niya to play. So pag ganun nangyayari, so that becomes a problem already. It becomes a disorder. Aside from that, the sensory modulation disorder, we also have sensory discrimination. So dito naman po, ang nahihirapan sila is to distinguish yung pagkakaiba-iba ng mga input. Okay? So yung similarities or pagkakatulad at pagkakaiba-iba, nahihirapan silang ma-recognize yun. Aside from that, this is the third one, we have the sensory-based motor disorder. So dito naman is more of related sa movement. So yung nervous system ng bata, hindi niya napaprocess ng maayos or nai-integrate yung movement. Kaya ang nangyayari, nagkakaroon siya ng problem with motor skills. So we will focus on this sa mga susunod na slides. There are two types of sensory-based motor disorder. We have the postural disorder and then dyspraxia. Okay, let's talk first about over-responsivity. So ito, tinatawag din natin siya sensory defensiveness. So ang mangyayari dito, ang common reaction is aversion to sensory stimuli. Ang usual reaction would be fright, flight, or fight. So paano nyo siya i-explain? Kunyari po, madalas, kunyari, yung takot, makikita nyo sa mukha nila. After that, ang tendency nila is to avoid the situation. So that's flight. Okay, so hindi na siya lumalabas or he's going to avoid particular situation. For example, that kid, ayaw niyang umattend sa mga parties, sa mga kiddie parties kasi maingay. Okay, now overwhelmed siya doon. And then, what's the fight response? So, pag ganon, madalas umiiyak sila, nagwawala. Okay, so they resist physically, nagtatantrum. So those are the frequent responses pag sensory over-responsivity. On the other hand, sensory under-responsivity naman, ito yung if the kid for example has a very high threshold for tawag dito mga sensory input. So kumbaga bago siya mag-react, kailangan muna niya ng maraming input. So ano yung usual nilang response? Less than typical response to stimuli. Hindi sila masyadong nag-react. They do not appear to process and respond to sensory information such as noise, movement, or touch. Okay? So for some kids, makikita nyo po ito na parang ng pinaka-common na sign, hindi sila masyadong nasasaktan. Nadadapa na, nasusugatan, pero hindi sila masyadong nag-react. So, under-responsive yung system niya, kumbaga. Next is the sensory seeking. So they require unusual or intense amount of stimulation. Hindi siya nasasapat sa kanila yung mga input na nakukuha nila. So they tend to crave it. For example, there are kids na nagka-crave ng movement or ng vestibular input. So ang tendency nila would be sila yung makakarakterize po natin as medyo hyperactive, sobrang likot, hindi mapakali. Sa school, kunyari, tayo ng tayo, hindi siya mapaupo. Okay? Kung nakaupo man, hindi niya mapigil yung sarili niyang gumalaw. Restless siya, mahilig mangulit ng classmates. So sila, hindi nahihirapan sila to stay put. For example, even standing up sa line, hindi sila makasettle down doon. Kailangan gumalaw sila or tumalon or kung ano-anong movement na ginagawa. So let's talk about over-responsivity muna. Iisa-isahin po natin ito, no? So sa tactile system, if over-responsive yung system na ito, they respond negatively to light touch. So that's the number one thing na makikita nyo. Ayaw nilang hinahawakan. Okay? So, kung lalo na, if for example, you approach them galing sa likod, yung hindi nila nakikita na lumalapit kayo, bigla silang mag-react. So that's number one sign. And lalo na if it's light touch, yung marahan na paghawak, okay, they're overly ticklish, makilitiin. They're physically pushy. Bakit sila pushy? Kasi they tend to avoid yung mga situation na mahahawakan sila. So what they do is to fight, and pushing is one of their responses to it. Kumbaga, unahan na nila, tutulak ka na lang bago ka pa makalapit sa kanila. They prefer hugs or deep pressure. Okay? So kasi po pag deep pressure, that's calming for them. Mas gusto nila ang deep pressure or hug or massage kesa sa light touch. So, ito po yung actually one of the thing na pwede nyo gawin to calm them down. You provide deep pressure, like ihahug nyo sila, yung mga moments na nagwawala na sila or they're kumbaga, overly stimulated. So, pag gano'n na po sila, you can hug them to calm their system down. They walk on tiptoes. That's another sign of tactile over-responsive sign. Kasi possible na ina-avoid nila yung temperature, kunyari, ng floor or like yung texture ng floor. Hindi nila ma-tolerate yon na yung foot nila or yung feet nila lumalapat sa lupa or sa any other surfaces. But tiptoeing is not just like one of the signs of tactile system. Actually, it can be or proprioceptive, and it can be vestibular as well. Okay? So, maraming reason for tiptoeing. Alam ko very common po yan, lalo na dun sa mga mommies, na-observe niyo yan. Madalas silang nagtitiptoe. Okay? It can be tactile, it can be vestive, it can be probe. Kasi, di ba, bakit probe? Later on, sige, we will discuss it. Next is problems in self-help, school-related tasks, and socialization. Self-help, lalo na po yung mga activities na kailangan nila na merong tactile input, like yung cutting ng nails, cutting ng hair, pagsusuot ng damit, kasi it provides sensation, di ba? Yung skin to, yung texture ng clothes nila na sinusuot. So, it can be one of the reasons. Also, may mga mommy siguro na mapapansin na yung mga anak nila ayaw magsuot ng socks. So, that's very common also. Okay? Or yung sa damit, kailangan tanggalin yung etiketa. So those are the signs, okay, of an over-responsive tactile system. Bakit school-related task? Kasi with school-related task, marami doon activities na they need to use their hands. For example, yung paggamit ng glue, okay, or other art activities na may involve yung may iba-ibang texture na hawakan, okay? Socialization, bakit affected? Because again, pag socialization, hindi sila in control sa situation. So ayaw nila nung may lumalapit sa katawan nila, okay? Or may bigla ang hahawak sa kanila. So those are the things that they avoid. Next, over-responsive vestibular system. This is the common problem pag over-responsive yung vestibular system. Gravitational insecurity po yung tawag natin. I have a kid before, very obvious yung gravitational insecurity nila. So even yung mag-step up lang siya from sa foam, wala pa yung less than like ilang inches lang yan eh. Pero nahihirapan sila to step up. Kailangan pa niyang gumapang paakyat. So that's gravitational insecurity. Ibig sabihin, natatakot sila to yung itaas yung paa nila sa ground. So pag ganun na, aayaw na sila niyan. So yung nakikita niyong bata dyan sa drawing, hindi nila yan kaya. Okay? So with an over-responsive vestibular system, this activity, what the kid is doing, that's very challenging. So they are excessively cautious. Ano sila, matatakutin, okay? Masyado silang nag-worry from every time iniisip nila yung movement nila. They're slow to move kasi very sila, gusto nila secured yung position nila. So ang gagawin nila, mabagal silang gumalaw. They dislike playground equipment. Kasi pag playground equipment, lahat yon, most of it, 'di ba? Kailangan nilang umakyat, kailangan mag-lift yung leg nila up from the ground. So, ang tendency, aayaw sila pag playground equipment. Also, they dislike having their head tilted or upside down, particularly the one in the picture. Kaya sabi ko sa inyo, very challenging yung position na yan for kids with over-responsive vestibular system. Okay, konting galaw nyo lang. So, for example, may mga instances siguro na nakaka-observe kayo sa clinic, no? When your kid, yung anak nyo, nakahiga sa vestibular ball, yung malaking bola na ginagamit sa clinic, pag pinahiga sila and then minove sila backwards or sides to side habang nakahiga yung ulo nila nakalawit sa bola, hindi nila kaya yon. So it takes time for them to be able to tolerate that input. Uncomfortable sila sa elevator kasi there's movement there pero hindi like alam mo yan, umaakyat sila pero hindi sila gumagalaw. It's the same thing. Na-stimulate yung receptor nila sa inner ear. They do not like imposed movement. Ayaw nila ng imposed movement because they're not in control. So most of the time, if you're going to give them obstacle course activity, kunyari sa clinic or sa bahay, ayaw sila because hindi sila yung nagda-direct ng movement. Hindi sila yung nagko-control. So most of the time, they avoid movement activities. Another sign is madalas nahihilo sila. Because mabilis ma-stimulate yung vestibular system, mabilis silang masuka or mahilo. It's the same thing yun na mention ko kanina. If you're experiencing ear infection, even as an adult, it's the same sign that you're feeling. No, uncomfortable siya, nakakahilo, nakakasuka. They do feel that way as well. Now, over-responsive proprioceptive system. They prefer not to move, becomes upset. Actually, this area, hindi mo siya masyadong makikita eh. Kasi gagalaw at gagalaw naman yung mga bata. So, let's move on. Over-responsive visual system naman, they react to contrasting colors or reflection, okay? Lalo na pag bright, okay, yung surfaces or bright light. They avoid flickering light. And they are disturbed by movement. Kasi yung movement, that's visual input. Pag nakikita nila yon and it's repetitive, they cannot tolerate that input. Next, over-responsive auditory system. So they get stressed with loud noises or unexpected sound. So this is commonly observed dun sa mga bata na ayaw, for example example ko kanina is pumunta sa mall, nahihirapan sila to tolerate that because madaming tao. Or tawag dito, it can be sa parties kasi unexpected yung sounds doon, malakas, maingay, so they cannot tolerate it. There is prolonged distress from sudden sounds, and then even by typical sounds, hindi nila matolerate. Again, as an example, a while ago we talked about tactile input or tactile issues. So, kunyari, yung very common example dyan would be yung paggupit ng buhok, lalo na sa boys kasi they use razor. So, yung sound nun, minsan hindi na rin nila matolerate. That's why they don't like it. Aside from the tactile input that they're getting from it. Okay? Minsan, nas tolerate nila ang gunting kesa dun sa sound nung the razor. Under-responsive, dito naman, we're going to talk about under-responsivity. So this is the opposite nung over-responsive. So let's start again with tactile. With tactile system, hindi nila na-notice when they are touched. They're now unaware of the mess on their face or kahit sa buong katawan. Even the temperature change, hindi nila na-recognize. They have high pain tolerance. They don't realize when they drop something already kasi hindi nila masyadong nafe-feel. They lack inner drive to explore toys. Because again, some kids, 'di ba, pag bata ka, they love exploring toys because of the sensation that they're getting from it. Pero dahil under-responsive yung tactile system nila, wala silang masyadong nararamdaman. So they're not like into exploring toys. They may hurt other kids without feeling sorry. So, nabangga na niya yung bata, natulak niya, pero for them, it's nothing because hindi nila yun nafe-feel. So, that's one of the signs of an under-responsive tactile system. Next, under-responsive vestibular. Hindi din nila nararamdaman when they are being moved. Okay? Tapos, minsan din, kahit matagal siyang nagsiswing, hindi sila nahihilo. They love swinging. Okay? So, kahit paulit-ulit, kahit matagal, hindi sila nasusuka or nahihilo. So, ibig sabihin, under-responsive yung vestibular system nila. And most of the time, okay, pag ganito yung na-observe nyo, sila yung nagsisik ng input. So, sila yung malikot, palaging gumagalaw sa school or sa room, wala silang tigil, talon ng talon, takbo ng takbo, because again, yung threshold nila is masyadong mataas. So ang tendency nila is to react. So ang reaction would be to crave for that input to satisfy their craving, and once masatisfy na yun, saka sila mag-stop. Okay? So, even at home, you'll see that. Galaw ng galaw yung anak nyo, no? Hindi tumitigil sa pag-akyat, pagtalon, but after some time, makikita nyo siyang umupo. Kalmado siya. So, that's what ibig sabihin, they got already the input that they need, na-satisfy na yung craving nila, but again, it doesn't last long. Konting time lang po ito. After that, balik ulit sila sa pag-crave. Okay? So I think that's very common. Makikita nyo yan, lalo na ngayon. Kasi everybody, lahat ng bata nasa bahay lang. And ang problem natin when it's at home, very limited yung space. So hindi sila nakakakuha ng enough input sa bahay. So what they do is, they react, their body react. Ang reaction would be to crave for that input. So mas malikot sila. Okay? Mas kumbaga hindi tumitigil sa paggalaw. They also they exhibit seeking behavior. So yan na yung na-mention ko kanina. Talagang sinisik out nila yung input na kailangan ng hinihingi ng body nila. Next, under-responsive proprioceptive system. So paano mo siya makikita? They have low muscle tone. So paano mo siya malalaman? Pag ginawakan nyo po yung anak nyo, yung muscle niya malambot, hindi siya firm. Pag kunyari nilift niyo yung skin niya, makikita nyo na parang sumasama yung laman. So that's how you see it. If you touch yung face ng anak nyo din, masyadong malambot. So most of the time, meron din silang feeding issues dahil may problem with the motor control or oral motor. When writing, yung elbow nila is supported by their body. Kahit hindi writing actually, any fine motor task, yung kamay nila gumagalaw pero kailangan nakasupport sa elbow or like nakapatong sa table yung hands nila, yung arm nila while their hands are moving. It can be also masyadong malakas yung hawak nila sa bagay-bagay. For example, kumbaga madidescribe natin as mabigat yung kamay. Hindi nila mag-grade ng maayos kung gaano yung lakas ng paghawak na kailangan nilang i-exert while using a particular object. For example, pag nagsusulat sa school, masyadong madiin, madalas na puputol yung pencil nila or like yung tip ng pencil laging pudpud. So those makikita nyo yung pag nagsusulat sila, yung hanggang sa ilang pages ng paper na matitrace mo yung pinagsulatan. So hindi nila mag-grade kung gaano lakas yung paghawak na kailangan nilang ibigay habang may hawak sila na or may ginagamit na bagay. Next, they love hugging or deep pressure massage. Pansinin nyo po dito, pag under-responsive yung system nila, ang tendency nila is to crave. Okay? So that's why they love yung hugging or deep pressure kasi sinisik ng body nila yung ganong sensation. Okay? So that's why also if under-responsive yung vestibular, malikot sila because they crave it. Pag under-responsive yung proprioceptive system nila, kinikrave nila yung deep pressure para mas maramdaman nila yung katawan nila. Also, when proprioception system is under-responsive, seeking yung behavior, like what I've said, what I've just said kanina. Next is under-responsive visual system. So, pag under-responsive ang visual system, they're unaware of light, and they may not blink, hindi sila kumukurap, even if yung light is bright, okay? They do not pay attention to new visual stimuli. They're unaware of contrast. Even yung movement in the background, hindi sila masyadong nagpe-pay attention to it. And then late yung response nila sa mga obstacle sa path nila. So usually ito yung mga makaka-characterize natin as very clumsy, madalas madapa, okay, madalas mahulog, Kasi yung body nila is hindi agad nag-respond. Okay? Under responsive sila, late yung response ng body nila. Auditory system, they do not respond to quiet or whispering sound or soft voices. So kung hindi ka sisigaw, hindi sila lilingon. Also, they appear to be not listening to your questions or instructions. Okay? You have to prompt them physically, tatapikin, or kailangan hawakan yung mukha nila para tumingin sa'yo. Para just to make sure that he or she is listening to your question or your instruction. Also, at times, they may speak very softly. Next, we move to sensory seeking. Okay, pag seeking tactile input, sila yung madalas nagre-request for tickle, tinatouch nila lahat. Okay? Minsan, madalas kinukuskus nila yung mga object sa katawan or sa skin nila. They bite. Okay, madalas din ito, binabite nila yung katawan, yung skin nila. Gusto nila yung madumi, okay, messy textures. Kinikrave nila yung malalagkit na texture or even yung mga rough texture. They crave for strong taste. Madalas din silang nagmamouth ng objects or nagdilik ng objects. Next, seeking vestibular system. This is what I described kanina. They are always on the move. They keep on moving. They have difficulty sitting down or standing still. So those are the things, signs na that your kid is seeking vestibular system. Visual system, usually excessive yung panonood nila in front of TV or iPod. So pag ganito na, I have this kid na before, lagi siyang nakatingin doon sa mga naglumalabas na letters in the screen. Like, that kid can stay long na nakatitig dun sa, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the MMDA channel, yung may lumalabas na mga letters or words sa screen. Also, that kid likes yung mga pag nanonood ng movies, yung last part kung saan may lumalabas na mga letters. So those are the things that they crave. They enjoy flickering lights. That's another thing. Now, for auditory vestibular system, they like public places with loud noises. They turn up the volume most of the time sa sobrang lakas, but they don't mind it. They make their own noisy sound and clap hard. Okay?